All right, good evening, everyone. As you're all logging in, how are you? So, welcome to tonight's webinar on planning for the future for students with a disability. I'm Leanne, and I'm with the Clovis Unified Family Resource Center. So welcome. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, but before we get started, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and that we have Spanish translation. So if you look on the bottom of your toolbar, there is a symbol that says interpreter, I believe. Nick, what's it say down there? I can't see it with screen sharing.
It says English, and then if you click on the English button, it'll give you the option for Spanish or other, but don't hit other.
Thank you. Okay, so Rebecca Rodriguez is our amazing translator, and we're grateful for her here tonight. So again, you'll just click on that bottom button. So let's move on with housekeeping. As soon as I can figure out how to, there we go. I want to tell you a little bit about the Clovis Family Resource Center first. I am housed with the City Kids Early Intervention Program, but I serve families birth to 22 throughout the district. So the Family Resource Center is here to help you navigate special education, get connected to resources you might need in the district or out in the community, understand your parent rights, and again, just serve as a liaison for families. Let's see, this is the housekeeping I was referring to. So we, for questions, you can use the chat feature. You'll also see on the bottom the question and answer. That is a lot easier for us to keep track of. And so what we tend to do is if you have a question for our panelists during the webinar, if you'll use the question and answer, I'll be monitoring all that and it'll help me keep track and we can get those answered. But if you want to chat with each other, the other participants, use the chat feature. Let us know who you are and where you're from and post it in there. We'd love to know. Handouts. I said we're going to post in the chat box. I'm having a bit of trouble with that feature. And so I actually, if you need a copy of the PowerPoint, send me an email at the Family Resource Center and I can get that out to you. Oh, hold on. Let me go back. Wait, my mouse. There we go. Okay. Survey. There will be a survey you will see when we end tonight's webinar. It'll pop up, but don't fear if you don't see it. In the morning, I'm going to send out a recap email and it will have the link to that survey as well. Please take a moment and fill that out. It is so vitally important. We are able to provide these trainings for free because we get grants to serve you as families. And so if you could just take a moment, it really is valuable feedback for us to know if we're meeting your needs. And lastly, if you should happen to need a certificate that you attended this, for instance, if you're doing it for your work, again, let me know. I will be attaching that in tomorrow's email. So everything you need will be there. Oh, and this is being recorded, as I mentioned, and it will be posted on the FRC YouTube channel by the end of the week in case you want to get a chance to watch it later or share it. That being said, the quick disclaimer, of course, this is for educational purposes only and not legal, medical, or, you know, it's just parent-to-parent support. Okay, so with that, I want to kick it off and turn it over to our presenters from EPU, Jen Doty and Nick Letton, and I'm so grateful they're here to share their information with us. While Nick is getting set up to share his screen, I'm going to launch a poll and find out who you are. So thank you for taking a moment to fill that out.
Thanks, Leanne. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen, and I'm so grateful. We're so grateful that you're spending your time with us this evening because we know you have families and there's so many other things you could be doing. So we are glad that you are here. We are family members of loved ones with a disability as well. And so our kids have challenges and we've been through the process, and that's why we do the work that we do. So Nick and I are both from Exceptional Parents Unlimited, and it's also known in the community as EPU Children's Center. We are a federally funded PTI, which is a Parent Training and Information Center. And so there are parent training and information centers in every state, but since California is so large, there are 5, and we are just one of them. We cover 12 counties. So Fresno and Clovis is one of the areas that we cover, and we are here locally. So we support the family resource centers, and we're super grateful that Leanne invited us in to share information with you tonight. But if you're from our area, we're happy to support you as well. And we play very well together. So I like working with Leanne. So we're just here to support you and help you navigate the systems that serve your kids, whether that's the regional center system or the educational center or the educational system. So that's a little bit about our agency. As I mentioned, I'm a parent. And so I have 3 kids. And so this training in particular is very close to home because my kids are on the older side. My kids are 23, 19, and 18. And so they have all finished school in the last few years here. And this was a very overwhelming process. And so since all 3 of my kids have disabilities, and they're all different disabilities, they all navigated that piece a little differently. So happy to share information with you this evening. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. First off, I just want to thank Leanne and Clovis Unified for allowing us to come in and talk to everybody. This is one of the trainings. We do a lot of trainings, as Jen said, throughout California, but this is one that we believe is so important because it's something that flies by so fast. Transition when your child turns 18, between 14 and 18 is like that. And so it's something that we forget, especially as parents with children with special needs, because we have so much going on, right? So there's a lot of information in this, but it's so valuable. And it's one of the very first trainings that I learned when I started working with EPU, and I loved it. Again, my name is Nick Lutton. I'm an education resource specialist at EPU Children's Center in the Family Resource Center and at the PTI. I have 2 children. I have an 8-year-old with autism and intellectual disability who's a regional center client, who has an IEP and a behavior intervention plan. And I also have a 2.5-year-old who is a regional center client going through what's called the IFSP process because he's at risk because his brother has a developmental disability and he has a speech delay. And so because of that, going through those systems, I haven't gone through transition. I've counseled many parents that have gone through transition, but in general, this is something that is always on my mind, what's going to happen. And the more information I have, the better prepared I am mentally for it. And so I hope that you find this information as useful as I do. And hopefully it's interactive. And again, we just really appreciate Clovis Unified bringing us in. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start it. We okay?
Sounds good.
Very good. Thanks, you
Oh.
guys.
I just got disabled.
Oh, no.
Post-disabled participant
Oh,
sharing.
no.
That's
Uh-oh.
okay. I just had it
Hold
up. I
on.
apologize. I don't know
It's
why.
okay. Let me see.
You just make me a co-host. and
There we go. You are now a co-host.
There we go.
Share your screen away.
There we go. It happens.
I was gonna say, we're not gonna wait 5 minutes.
No, we're not going to wait 5 minutes.
So we have titled this workshop several different things, including the journey, but also help my child's growing up, now what? But it's all the same piece. It's talking about, what's going to happen when you're in this high school age, getting out of school. We're going to talk about diploma track, certificate track, and what happens beyond a little bit there. So we'll go ahead and get started. So it is a journey. It needs a roadmap. And fortunately, this journey comes with a guide, and it's really important to remember that the family is key to this process. Even though our students are getting older and we're going to talk about age of majority, they're going to turn 18, they're going to be allowed to make choices, which is scary, but we can help guide them. So while we want them to make their own decisions, we're very grateful to the families that are involved in the process and the families that are here tonight. And I just love seeing the number of participants that are already logged in to get this information. So thank you guys for being here. Next. So it's in family, we can't stress enough how important family is. You really are the first role model for your child. You show examples of career guidance and support. A lot of times our kids choose careers based on what they see, and they see what mom or dad or aunt or uncle, grandma and grandpa, we see those jobs, and that's how they know what to explore moving on in life. So we expose them to those careers and occupations. They get connected with other people in the community based on our contacts and our networks. And the family's values and attitudes around those things can definitely shape where they're moving ahead in the future. So how we handle our own time management, how we demonstrate and model social skills and hygiene, all of those pieces are key to their success moving on. And so when you're in the IEP meeting, if your child has an IEP, a lot of times as a family member, we feel maybe less important because we don't have a credential, we don't have those initials behind our name, we're not a therapist or a counselor, but you're the only person in the meeting that is in love with this child and has loved this child for their lifetime. And that makes you an extra important member at the table. And so if you have a goal without a plan, it's really just a dream. So that's why planning is so important. And so if we want our kids to achieve those goals, we do need to plan. So Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so that's what we're about, is creating plans that can help build success for our kids. So when I first started EPU, as Nick said, when he first started, I saw these statistics in this training, and I was really shocked with them. So there was a poll that was done, and before there was a supported movement, we saw that traditionally students on an IEP had a 40% high school dropout rate. Moving on, there was an 80% unemployment rate. They were 4 times more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. Only 0.5% of adults who began SSI ever got off their benefits. And on SSI, the income is about $11,000, and no one can really survive on that. And so those were the startling statistics that I was faced when I started work. And so there has been a movement since then to change that. So that's our goal behind this training, is to change those statistics, move them so that we have good transition planning, and really both federally and the state have backed good transition planning. It's going to lead to academic success. There's better school attendance when we know that we're going to school and looking towards the future and planning for our future. There's some buy-in. There's an increased opportunity for that social development. So besides just understanding how to get along with your friends, we also start learning how to work with one another that then goes into the workplace later on. If we can do a project with one another in school, then maybe we can team build and work with our team in the future in the workplace. We see increased soft skills, and we'll talk about what soft skills are a little bit later in the training, and overall happier lives because students have buy-in towards their future planning. And so when we think about things, college, and the answer for everybody is not necessarily college, but college or training or vocational experiences, all of those things lead to better post-school outcomes. So after high school, any of these things can help lead to better experiences and future success. So our goal is to plan ahead. So students receiving a certificate of completion, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, if your child is on a certificate track, they may stay on their IEP through age 22. And that's how we have students in the 18 to 22-year-old program. So in other cases, if a student graduates after their senior year, instead of receiving a certificate of completion, then their IEP is over. And it's up to the students to advocate for their own services. And so we really stress self-advocacy at this time. We really want to build the students' ability to speak up and understand their needs and articulate those needs to the people that support them. So it's very important to involve your student in the IEP process early. And for every child, that's different. So for one of my kids, they started very early on in the process. For another, my oldest, he knew that there were meetings, but he didn't fully attend them until he was in high school. And even then he asked if he really had to. So we want to involve them early in the process though, because hearing their voice, whether that's just that you bring information to the meeting on their behalf, but hearing their voice and allowing them to speak up in some way about their education leads to more buy-in and it leads to greater success. And it's very important for them to be involved in a little way or a big way. It really depends on the child. So self-advocacy, assisting and guiding students as they begin making decisions that affect the rest of their lives. So we can model this early on. I mentioned in education, being able to speak up in those meetings, whether they're there physically and actually speak up in the meeting. Maybe they write a letter to their team or share some insight with you and you're able to speak up on their behalf. But the fact that they realize that they have input into the education process is really important. Later on, they'll get to think about where they want to live. They're going to have to make their own medical decisions in a lot of cases. They're going to learn how to budget, think about who to live with, and they're going to need daily life skills. And so if we can model some of those things for them, then they will be better equipped to be able to do this on their own or with support in the future.
Jen, not to interrupt, but you know what I think is really important about something you just mentioned is that depending on a child's ability, so we might have families here whose child, is severely medically disabled, or the opposite end of the extreme, right? They're all different kinds of disabilities. But I love what you shared about giving the child a voice to whatever that capability they have, of even if it's documenting what their preferences are, right? We all have preferences. And if your child physically doesn't have a voice, then this is your opportunity to help share that for them. So thank you for bringing that up, Jen. That was a really good point. Because I think a lot of us, we as moms and dads, we spend so many years when they're young being their voice that sometimes it's hard to step back a little and encourage them to share their preferences.
Well, and self-advocacy really starts at an early age. So you can, by asking them, do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt? Well, if they choose the blue shirt and you say, never mind, you still get to wear the red shirt, then you're not listening to their voice. So creating experiences where they can have a voice and honoring their voice is really important. And then, like you mentioned, some of our kids do not, they express themselves in different ways. And so I know Nick has done a great job, especially during pandemic, of documenting things on video. So documenting little pieces on video and then bringing that to the team meeting so that the team has a window into the child, their likes and their dislikes or their struggles. And so there's lots of creative ways, and we could talk about that all evening, but we won't. But there's lots of creative ways to bring your child's voice to the table, whether they physically can come to the table or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome. And
And
Nick,
so I was going to say, and so I'm going to go ahead and take over to some of the, what some people would call the fun stuff, the interesting stuff, difficult stuff. These are the protections under the law, and I'm going to go into these in somewhat detail, but I'm going to give you an overall, and some of this you might already know because your children might be a little bit older already, right? Because we're here for transition, and some of them you might not know as of yet, and hopefully it gains some insight. So IDEA, which is the principle that governs everything, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is a federal act that was in 1975. And again, that's about the 13 areas of disability that have to do with the school system in regards to receiving an IEP and things of that nature. One of the ones that you see on there, a lot of you have probably never even heard of, and we all discussed how to even say it. WIOA, WIOA, and we all don't know yet. It's WIOA, which is the Work Investment Opportunity Act. And what this act does is that it primarily focuses on getting jobs for youth, especially ones with disabilities. So it's a specific act, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about why this is important and what agencies go into this, because it's something that we don't talk about a lot in the education field or even in the disability field until we get to the part where we need to start figuring out how we're going to get out of those percentages, like Jen said, when we had that 1 to 2% or 0.5%. How do we do that? This is one of the ways in which the government and communities have decided to do this. The Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, again, provides accommodations to overcome barriers, and that's inside of the school system, but also in life, which is very interesting. So anybody that receives federal dollars from the federal government, it's illegal for them to go ahead and discriminate based upon a disability. And Title 504 does that. And so this can go, a 504 can go beyond the school setting into daily life. And that's why we're going to go ahead and keep talking about these things. And the age of majority. And that's something that's thrown around a lot. And if I broke it down really easily, when a child turns 18, they are no longer a child. That is the age of majority. And unless a court decides otherwise, they can make their own decisions. And as a parent, you have no rights. So again, it's not to be abrasive, and it's not to shock you with that information. It's to arm you with that information, knowing that if you have a child that might need additional assistance after the age of 18, there's time to start planning, right? And we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But again, the age of majority is 18, regardless of disability, unless a court decides otherwise. So, and I'm going to briefly go over some of these. And again, some of you might know some of this, but the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is a federal education law, and it protects students from the age of 3 to 22 who are eligible for special education plan, an IEP. As we all know, the IEP is a legally binding contract that secures educational services and supports to help ensure a successful outcome for your student throughout school. With an IEP, in regards to how it works, there are 13 categories that a child can fit into. And within those 13 categories, there needs to be an additional barrier of not being able to access the education. So an example of that being if your child, say, has autism. If your child has autism, but doesn't need any accommodations or modifications in school, this wouldn't apply to them. It has to be a barrier for their education. So those 13 categories, and again, I'm not going to list all of them, but and they're all acronyms, right? Because we love our acronyms in the special education world: OHI, other health impairment, emotional disturbance, autism, intellectual disability, traumatic brain injury, deaf, blind, hard of hearing, things of that nature. And so again, overall, this is what we're looking at when we're talking about IDEA, which is the substance of the educational world. So the Work Investment Opportunity Act, I'm just going to call it WIOA, okay? But WIOA, it's a collaboration of 3 departments to coordinate the transition services for a smooth process into adulthood. And this is where we start to get into the real meat of everything when it comes to coordinating services when your child is about to turn to the age of majority. So when Congress was reviewing the educational laws that govern the IEP process, they noticed that some important patterns were left out of the original process. So in 2016, Congress mandated that these 3 government entities work together in conjunction to enhance transition planning. So we have the Department of Education, which we all know what that does. And for us, that's CDE, the California Department of Education, the Department of Rehab, and the Department of Rehabilitation, DOR, as it's commonly known. And DOR is specifically for pre-employment and employment. And again, with students with disabilities, and we're going to talk at length in regards to what DOR can do and how they play a role in your child's transition. The other one is DDS, which is the Department of Developmental Services. That governs services that youth can utilize, if eligible, as an adult, including regional center services. So if your child is a regional center client, DDS, the Department of Developmental Services, also looks over the regional center, funds them in regards to what's called the Lanterman Act. But again, we won't go too far into that. So these are the 3 agencies that work together at transition. So Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act services those with a disability of any kind. Remember I said earlier, we had the 13 categories, that's separate. 504 is any disability, and it prohibits discrimination by any federally funded program or activity. So again, that's another key piece of information. And it serves those eligible throughout life. And so again, deciding on how things work and the congruity of how we get our children to adulthood and into the work sector and things of that nature, it might need accommodations, and Section 504 does that for your child, for your adult at this point. It provides services and accommodations for them.
And Nick, we have a question.
Yeah.
Are those all state agencies? The CDE, the DOR, and the DDS? So
the Department of Developmental Services, federal agency. DOR is a federal agency, and so I said Department of Education, which is a federal agency, but we have listed on there CDE, which is the California Department of Education. So yes, all 3 of them are federal, but here in California, you would work with the state, which would be the CDE, and then DOR and DDS. Those would be the 3. And I know we're using a lot of acronyms. It's a lot of info. So again, I'm going to try to say them as I go. But yes, they are all federal agencies, just into subgroups. So when we talk about age or majority, remember, if there's anything you remember of this slide, all means all, okay? All children that turn 18 are adults, unless otherwise deemed by a court, regardless of their disability. So again, we talk about this, and it's really interesting because we get a lot of parents that call us afterwards or whatnot, and we really try to put it home that it doesn't matter what your child's disability is. When they turn 18, they're an adult. They can make their own educational decisions, healthcare decisions, finance decisions, and living options, whatever they want, and you're not involved. It's not to scare you. It's to make you understand that time goes by very fast. And if you do need to make changes to this, please do. There are avenues in which you can. But remember, unless it's through a court, doesn't make a difference. Your kid can do whatever they want when they turn 18. And the law doesn't recognize children that have disabilities as those that would be unfit to be the age of majority or as an adult. In fact, California has one of the strictest guidelines in regards to making sure that there is a service that they have to discharge to those who have disabilities. It's in our state constitution. No other state in the United States has that, which means that the state makes sure that people that are 18 that have disabilities are citizens and they can do what they want to do. So just remember that. It's a very important fact throughout this entire talk. And we're going to talk a little bit more about other areas. And I'm going to kick it back over to Jen.
Thanks. 18 we get from, you mentioned 14, we get from freshman year to 18 so quickly. And we often think, especially when that child or student is so heavily dependent on mom or dad or the family system, and then all of a sudden 18 does come, or maybe it's 18 and a half or 19, and all of a sudden then our kids are like, I get to do this. It's like, oh, you do. It's a harsh reality for mom.
Or you make that first phone call and that person on the other end of the phone won't talk to you because your child's an adult now. That's a huge shock to a lot of parents.
And that's a great point. Even our typically developing children, right? At 18, if they were to go off to college and they're still on our insurance and they need to, go see a doctor or a dentist, and we call to check up on the bill, and they're, more than likely going to say, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, I can't talk to you about it, even though you're the one paying the bill. And so, it is important to think about these things ahead of time.
Yes. So we're going to talk now a little bit about, we're going to get into our education roadmap and talk about IEPs and ITPs. So again, we like our acronyms. So in school, if your child is receiving special education supports and services, they will have an IEP. And as part of that IEP, as your child hits transition age, by the time they are 16, they need to have an ITP as part of their IEP, and that's a transition plan. And so the transition plan is an additional document that gets added into the IEP and becomes part of the IEP. We'll talk about that. And then we start to involve DOR. So not all students, Nick shared a little bit about DOR, not all students utilize service through DOR, but it is an option. And then students also have the option as they're moving out of high school and looking for still protections for the fact that they have a disability or a challenge or a limitation. A 504 plan can help cover some of those bases and give them accommodations as they go on with their education outside of the school, outside of the high school, after that IEP is over. So the IEP does remain in effect throughout high school, unless for some reason, unless they come off of it, unless you guys, unless the team decides that they're no longer eligible. But throughout high school, you can be on an IEP. It's updated annually, as you know, and it is focused on academic goals, typically. And the focus is on graduation or the certificate requirements. So it's about how to be successful in school while you're in school. And as we add in that transition plan, we're going to be looking at a few other things. So all students on an IEP, that transition plan needs to be added before age 16. A lot of times we will see schools, because we work with 12 counties, so we see schools in all different districts. Some schools will add that transition plan in freshman year. Other times it really is just right before the age of 16. But if you're not seeing one, if you have a freshman and you're not seeing a transition plan and you'd like one, because that time goes by so quickly, you may request that transition planning happens earlier freshman year. So the purpose of that transition plan is really to look beyond school. So education is a component to it, but we're looking at future employment, how that child is going to be independent moving forward in the future, whatever level of independence that is for your child, because every child is going to have different levels of independence. If they are going to be connected with an agency and get some agency assistance, like Nick mentioned, DOR or other agencies. And then we also look at the components regarding how they're going to life skills for living moving forward, the residential pieces, the social component, how they're going to get along and work and play in their community. And I mentioned play, so recreational, what are some recreational pieces? What are their interests? Because if we can work where their interests lie, then we're going to be more successful too. So it's going to incorporate all of these pieces into the transition plan, or a good transition plan should incorporate all of those pieces. So components of the transition plan, they will be looking at where does your child, what's going to happen in the future for your child with education, what are their plans? And if they can articulate what they want to do in the future, does that require college, vocational training? What type of classes will they need for that? Maybe it's going to be some supportive employment, some practicing in a work environment while they're still in school can even be part of that plan, so that they get some practice and it's really a learning experience of how do you learn to have a job. It can include continuing ed or adult education, independent living skills, like I mentioned earlier, and how they're going to participate in their community. So the goals and services written need to reflect the student's goals. So many times, as we've looked at things over the 12 counties that we serve, so many times we will see kind of the cookie cutter plan that gets presented to our students. And so we really want to make sure, again, that their voice is showing up in this document. So we've seen, that the student will learn to independently take care of, sometimes they'll talk about home things. So cooking and I've had cooking and cleaning show up and students say, yeah, really my future planning doesn't involve cooking and cleaning. So we really want to make sure that our goals surrounding the future contain both things, what's important to our students and what's important for our students, because learning how to handle food properly or how to make sure things are clean and sanitary, those are important things for our students. And then we also need to make sure that we're including things that are important to the students so that they have buy-in. So when you're creating the plan, there should be some assessments, career exploration assessments, interviews with the student, different ways that we can get this knowledge. And they will look at a couple different areas. They'll look at what education pieces would be connected with that, what employment opportunities, depending on what your child wants to do in the future. There's a lot, this document and this time of talking about transition, there's a lot that they really can do. It really just depends on your child's team, your child's teacher, your child's investment, your investment in transition planning. But again, the more we plan and the more we are involved in creating the plan and the more we use the plan will depend on how successful that plan is. Next. So those two documents kind of blend our educational pieces and our future goals. So that's why that transition plan gets folded into the IEP. So here's an example of a goal that might be in an ITP. Jessica would like to attend college after graduation and obtain a career in computer processing. So if that's what Jessica wants to do, then we might come up with some short-term goals that would help Jessica be successful in that. So maybe she will enroll in some computer classes or explore what's being offered in her area. Maybe she'll have a goal to secure a job at the school or in the community that utilizes some of those skills. So if we can practice that and see if that's really what she wants to do. She can, again, look into those local colleges to see who has programs. She might plan a visit to the college or fill out the application for college admission. So those are some short-term objectives. And then we can also look at some long-term objectives, what's going to happen after graduation. And so maybe after graduation, Jessica will be enrolled to attend her local college in the fall semester in a computer programming program. And so it really helps us see, here's how we explore it a little bit, and here's the big goal that we want to complete. Next. And another example, John would like to work in a retail store. So some short-term objectives might include needing to build a resume so that he can turn that in. He might work with the workability program to have some work experience or other programs that support giving our students work experience. He might research the different types of retail stores, and maybe he'll realize that he would not like working at this really busy store, but this small game store he's very interested in. You know, all of our kids have different interests. So really thinking about what is the environment where John thinks he'll be successful. Learning proper soft skills, how to relate to others so that he can maintain that job moving forward if he were to get one. And thinking about things like transportation. That's a big piece to keeping and maintaining a job, is having ongoing reliable transportation, whether that's the bike, the bus, mom, dad, Uber, but having secure transportation if you have a job. Long-term objective, the student will have the necessary skills to obtain and maintain retail position with supports needed to be successful. Next. And we've been throwing out the word soft skills or the phrase soft skills. And here's some example of soft skills. They're the things that kind of want to say you can't teach, but we really do need to teach them. We need to practice them. Things like strong work ethic. A lot of these are taught by modeling, and not all of our students pick up on modeling. So then we have to explain them. So strong work ethic, dependability, having a positive attitude, even when you don't feel positive, staying self-motivated, being team-oriented. And I know Nick mentioned that his son has autism. I have a child with autism as well, and teamwork is a struggle. It is really hard. So it's something that we have to practice and be conscious of and work on, because we know it doesn't feel natural. We like to do work independently. So that team concept, we have to practice and model. And did I say practice? Practice again. How to be organized, working well when you're under pressure and not just breaking. Having effective communication is key. Learning to be flexible, even when those unexpected things come up, or especially when those unexpected things come up. And being confident in yourself, because a lot of our students have the capacity to do great things, and yet not necessarily self-confident and think that they can't. So we want to model confidence and build their self-confidence so that they can be confident when they go to their job. And we're back to DOR.
That's my cue. So I'm going to talk more about DOR, the Department of Rehabilitation, and what it has to do with our transition planning. And again, hopefully throughout this presentation, you've realized that there's a trend, right? The team in itself is something that is extremely useful, not only to the child turning into an adult, but to the family as well, to ease your frame of mind. And so DOR, and we've worked with them and the schools work with them. The purpose of DOR is to create promising educational and employment futures for persons with disabilities that desire to work as an adult. What ended up happening is that Congress did an investigation finding that if children leave high school with very little vocational skills and very little education, that again, we come back to that 0.5% of those that end up on SSI, and that 0.5% never get off SSI. Because of that, Congress mandated that the Department of Rehabilitation step in at the age of 16. And so you can see how important the Department of Rehabilitation is in regards to research and, again, helping find employment, gainful employment, and continuing on with future. Because SSI as an adult disability equals poverty. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of our kids as adults and people just in general end up, because again, it's not much. We all know that. If you just read the news at all, you know that. So again, DOR is great, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. We've talked about WIOA, right? The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. WIOA mandates that every high school will be provided with a DOR counselor to further assist students and families in planning a successful transition into an educational experience or job placement, leading to services after graduation. So, looking into that, you can see how much Congress and DOR have mandated, again, that a DOR counselor should be there. And again, this is for assistance with your child moving into adulthood. How are we going to get there? And I'm going to explain a little bit more about what DOR's role is in that when they get into that IEP process, what they can do and what they can help with. So the pre-employment transition services are available from the ages of 16 to 22. And this is the kind of circle that the Department of Rehabilitation has. Job exploration and counseling. Again, we have to figure out what our kids want to do, right? Do they want to work in a restaurant? Do they want to cook? Do they want to, do they want to design clothes? What do they want to do? And DOR helps with that. They put forth initiatives and planning in regards to certain vocational activities. They also do work-based learning and, on-the-job learning, which is fantastic. Again, I think the vocational training is something that we're lacking, and DOR is all about vocational training and helping. They also promote self-advocacy skills. DOR, and I've met with several of them throughout the Central Valley and other areas that we serve, they are very pro self-determination. They're very pro having this adult stand on their own 2 feet. And they are very good at it if they are used correctly. And again, like all the tools that we have in our tool belt, when it comes to these complex systems of care, we have to use it correctly. And we learn how to do that through agencies such as Leanne's or ours at EPU to understand how we do these things. Post-school opportunities as well. And then workplace readiness. Workplace readiness is a big one because we can plan and get everything all set and ready to go. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're ready to insert that person into that employment field and that they are confident that they can do that job. And so DOR looks over the entire circle of getting a child turning into an adult ready to do that specific vocation. And so those are the 5 components that are offered by DOR. But one of the other things that's offered is services. DOR is basically a work-based agency. If a student had a strong desire to pursue their education that would lead to a job that may qualify for any kind of assistance, DOR equals money. So services after high school and adult transition program for work-based goals. DOR can assist with expenses. Because again, the expenses to help a child or an adult that has a disability enter the workforce is way more lucrative economically, not only for society, the community at large, and just in general, than it is to have a adult that is collecting Social Security. So college tuition, books, lab fees, leading to a job. Remember, everything has to lead to employment. Apprenticeship programs, if they wanted to do a technical trade skill, trade schools, work expenses as well, transportation costs, clothing, the uniform allowance, things of that nature. The amount of things that they can actually do to reimburse is huge. That not only can take off the burden from the family, but take off the burden from that adult individual that is now responsible for themselves and their finances. So again, looking at DOR, it has such an important role in where we're at. And we would highly recommend that you ask that a DOR counselor be with you at your IEP meetings, because they can attend the IEP meetings. They can be there to help, and they should be there to help. They are another complex system of care, and they are fantastic. They do work with the regional center very well and other agencies, as well as the school district. So again, just in general, DOR has unbelievable programs, and I highly suggest that you look at their website, and we'll be sending this information out too. But one of the things that we wanted to move on and ask, and maybe you can put this in the chat, it's totally up to you. I know you're all in webinar mode, but I wanted to see what you thought, whether this was true or false. So adult service providers, including college programs, will pick up where a school district leaves off and continue to provide intensive services to your student to the maximum their employment and independent living goals. So do you think when a child leaves high school with an IEP or a plan, that other providers are going to pick up where they left off and do it just as intensely as the school did? And again, I can't see any of your hands raised or anything like that, but maybe someone on the panel might want to answer that question, or we could just read them off.
Oh, we have lots of comments in the chat that have already said, no, false,
No,
false, false, false.
that is absolutely correct. And I'm sorry, I'm doing two things at once, so I can't look at the chat. That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And that's one of the misconceptions that a lot of parents have when they come to us, is that my child had all of these services beforehand. Look at these documents, look at this, and we see all of them, we read all of them. But the child's 19, that's not a child anymore. And other institutions are under no obligation to do just as much. So again, not anything to be frightened about, stuff to have in the back of your head as you continue on in this journey.
And that's not to say either, we're not saying that, I think that as parents, we think like, okay, especially when we finally get an IEP team that we're working with and we're feeling good about, and we think it's going to continue on. And even when we get perhaps a circle of support or other things so that we can move forward in what seems to be supportive in the future for our kids when they're over 18 and out of high school, we're not saying that these other things should continue to run like an IEP. That's not what we're saying at all. We're just trying to bring the reality of, you've gotten kind of used to this normal of having IEP meetings, having a team of resources, having those specialists, and sitting down around a table with each other or over Zoom to discuss your child's plan. And that is not what happens after high school, after 18. And I think the big piece, and I've seen it in the chat too, is just mom and dad aren't in control anymore. And that is the hardest thing. And usually we're sitting in a room with parents having this conversation, doing this training. I do miss the big boardroom, Leanne, and being with your families in person. But that realization, and I think even as a parent of children who have now turned 18, it's like, oh yeah, I know that, until, like Leanne said, until you call the doctor's office to pay the bill and they won't talk to you, or until your child is in tears because they need to reorder their prescription and they can't make that phone call to order their prescription. And in some of our kids' cases, they really can't. And you have to support them through that because legally they can and they have to, and it's not our role anymore. So our role turns into a supportive role in supporting them. And I love that Leanne mentioned earlier to you, are typically developing 18-year-olds, are typically developing 8-year-olds need that support too. Just our students with needs and disabilities, challenges, they're going to need a little more intensive support.
Right. And Jen, not to get off track too much, but in the chat, we were talking about the hot topic of conservatorship. And there has been a big push by disability activists that for person-centered planning and individuals with disabilities being able to make their own choices, and no matter how you feel about that, right? I mean, of course that's a good thing, but there is a component of that is cutting out families, and so it really is such a personal choice and things that families have to navigate together, again, because you do know your child best. How many times have I talked to a family who's concerned because their child with a disability says, well, I want to be a rock star, and and that's great, maybe they're going to be a rock star, but mom and dad are concerned about, but how are they going to navigate all these systems alone? And so it really is, again, I think all of us here tonight, our hearts are that we want you as parents, again, not to be scared, but just to be prepared to learn from bumps in the road that we didn't know about. And it is so different when you realize that at 18, if your child got a diploma, they could still have some significant disabilities in navigating life, and to find out, that support system is gone. And so again, our hearts are just that we want to support you. We want to help you navigate this, and to be prepared and start getting those conversations going with your teams. But those are all, power of attorneys, conservatorships, all those, they kind of are hot topics right now, and really things that families have to discuss and prepare for, how your family wants to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we do have, and we will get the information, Leanne, out to you. We do have a conservatorship workshop coming up in February. So that's a great resource for families. It'll be provided in both English and Spanish, 2 separate nights. And it really is a conversation because every family is unique, every child is unique. And one of the things to think about, because as parents, we're trying to avoid our kids making the mistakes perhaps that we made. But if we think about when I was 18, when I was 20, when I was 24, what choices did I make as a typically developing young adult, but was still an adult? Yeah, I made lots of poor choices. And so our kids with disabilities will probably also make lots of choices that we would not like them to make. I saw in the chat, there was the one comment that she's my child. And I'm sure that my mom felt that strongly as I was 18 and 20 and, moving on. So there is a piece of, as parents, we want to help our kids make really good choices. And in some cases, for some of our kids, they do need to be conserved. They cannot make their own choices. They just cognitively, developmentally are not going to be able to make those choices. And so those are the cases where conservatorship is a really important piece for families that choose to go that route. And it does play a role in some of those pieces. But in other pieces, it's really working with your child for your child to begin to recognize you as a tool and a resource and a support, and others in their life as a resource and support. Because, they're not always going to want mom and dad. So maybe there's a trusted family friend that they always go to ask questions. Then they feel like they're not going to mom and dad, but that they have supports. And that's really the piece, other than that small percentage that will get conserved. The rest of the folks, we're going to grow up to learn how to, as we call it in my house, adulting. And adulting just really kind of stinks. I don't like to adult. In fact, Nick joked with me in my office the other day. My 18-year-old asked if they could be conserved. And Nick's response was, what did you say, Nick?
What? I feel so embarrassed that I don't remember because so much has happened today.
So my child asked to be conserved, and Nick was very wise and said, if your child can ask to be conserved,
yes.
yes, they should be conserved.
Yeah, if they exactly. No, I'm so sorry, and it's been a long day. I've done a couple of trainings, and yes, I remember that conversation. Again, if your child has the cognitive ability to ask to be conserved, no, that's not how it works. And again, we talk about all this stuff, and I, as a parent, all of this stuff keeps me up at night. I'm not going to lie. Okay. All of the stuff that I talked about, and then I'm going to continue to talk about, keeps me up at night. The thing is, and I was fortunate enough to change careers to do this for a living because I wanted to know as much as I possibly could so I didn't have to worry. Didn't know I needed to actually change careers because I didn't. I could have just attended the workshops. But I loved it because what happens is now, instead of staying up at night worrying about what's going to happen for the future, I'm armed with the knowledge of what agencies I can go to help support me, who I can talk to about it, what I need to start doing when, and being front loaded like that. Even again, I have an 8-year-old. That's 10 years away, right? That's going to happen pretty quick. And planning has to start pretty quick. And every child and every family is individualized. And so we're not saying, and none of this is to scare any of you. It's not. It's to make you realize, and again, I call them truth bombs. You plant them in the back of parents' heads, because mine went off pretty hard one day. I mean, and I think it's happened for a lot of us that are on this call, right? That it comes to the realization our kid's going to grow up, and then what are we going to do? And when you have a child with special needs, the more information that you have and the quicker you can start planning, the easier that it'll be for you, right? It's just the front loading aspect. If we use it with our kids, we can front load ourselves. Me and Jen front load each other every day on stuff. So moving on from here, we talk about high school versus college, Jen.
We are going to talk about high school versus college, and there's so many things that are different between the two. Nick, would you like to take the part of high school or college?
I'll take high school.
Okay, so in high school,
an IEP defines needed services.
And in college, a student has to request their accommodations.
And in high school, the parents are part of the IEP team.
And in college, the student has to identify and self-refer for their services.
In high school, families have access to all their records.
And in college, I feel it's so hard. Families are not invited to meetings, and you do not have access to records without your child signing permission. So your child is welcome to invite you, but they are in the driver's seat. So they have to sign permission for you to have access to records. They have to invite you to meetings.
In high school, families, just like we're doing right now, advocate for the student's needs.
And in college, the student has to advocate for themselves. And I'm going to sidebar for just 1 second. My middle child attended high school at the same time as they attended college classes. And so the principal of the high school reminded us as parents not to try to approach college professors on our child's behalf and not to communicate with the college, really, I was going to say the college team, but not to communicate with the college, because it is now, even though my child started classes at 14 in college, it's their responsibility as a student to advocate for themselves, and we just support them.
And in high school, parents' permission is needed for assessments and implementation of IEPs.
And in college, services and assessments are the student's financial responsibility. And so we have a staff member, a former staff member, that would share her story that she had her child, a senior in high school, was doing really well, and they exited out of the IEP, and they didn't have anything written when they left high school because he was doing so well. But when they went to college and they had to demonstrate that he still needed support, they had to get reassessed. And that was the family, well, the student's responsibility, but then it came down to mom paying for it. The family's responsibility to pay for those assessments to prove that there was a need. And so she cautions all families on making sure that you keep your documentation.
So you can see the difference between the two of these, or obviously there's a stark contrast. And moving on from this one, we talk about very specific aspects of this in regards to eligibility, legal responsibility, and then procedural safeguards, things that we as parents have become used to because these are things that we do. And whose responsibility is what, right? And this is where everything starts to change. Jen, what do you want to take, high school or college?
Oh, I'll stick with college. Go ahead.
All right. So eligibility, to determine eligibility, the high school's responsibility is the evaluation conducted or paid for by the school district.
And in college, like I just mentioned, the student has to provide that documentation. And if you don't have it, you go get it and you pay for it yourself.
The legal responsibility of the high school is to provide FAPE, which is a free, appropriate public education.
And in college, their legal responsibility is just to ensure non-discrimination. So they're not allowed to discriminate against you for having a disability, but that is it.
And with procedural safeguards, that large packet that you receive every time you have an IEP meeting, the school's responsibility is to make sure that you have your due process rights or you have an OCR complaint. And I believe Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy complaint.
I'm going to go with Office of Civil Rights.
Office of Civil Rights, I apologize.
So in college, you can turn in an internal grievance, or you can turn in that Office of Civil Rights complaint. I did see in the chat, again, the piece that we've been trying to stress, that this doesn't seem to be applicable for students with disabilities. And that's really the point of why Leanne invited us here to get this information out, because unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you weigh it, our students with disabilities are still, as they turn 18, they're still adults, they're still citizens, and these are their rights, and these are their protections, and this is the reality, unless you have an adult who you, again, like Nick mentioned, go through court and have them conserved. But otherwise, they have all their own rights as adult citizens.
Yeah. You know, Jen, I think it's, and that's right. And I put that in the chat just now too. One of the things too that can be so hard right now, even with COVID, you know, I've spent many years caring for adult family members, you know, who had a disability or an illness. And like right now, you can't even go into a doctor's appointment or hospital. Many facilities, you know, are saying, nope, they can't, you know, have anyone with you. Or, you know, you can't attend with them. And you're like, wait a second, they can't navigate this by themselves. And so in the last, you know, 6 months or so, I've noticed that now they're allowing, you know, individuals that need that assistance to have a caregiver with them. But for a while, you couldn't even do that. It was like drop them off at the, front door, and it was terrifying, as a caregiver to think, how are they going to navigate this, and just to trust, that somebody in there is going to help them, loved ones with dementia, or, motor disabilities, whatever the case may be. But it's hard. It is hard. But again, this is COVID or no COVID. The topic tonight is that, when a child turns 18, these are all the changes that take place, and it's very difficult to navigate all of that. And so we do want you to be prepared.
Yeah.
And that is very true. And I want to be mindful of time and know that we still have more to get through. But during COVID, we had several hospital visits with my youngest, who is now 18. But we had several visits, I want to say 7 visits before the age of 18 during COVID, that we were in the emergency room. And I was allowed back because my child was a minor. So I was allowed back, and they have a disability. So we modeled how to speak and how to handle the emergency room, especially with all the COVID protocols. And when they turned 18, Leanne, when you said you dropped them off and you hope that somebody's there to help, I really do feel that, because I had to drop them off, and Nick knows. Nick has seen my face afterwards. When you drop your child, who's now 18, but you drop your child who's now an adult off, who doesn't necessarily know how to navigate well, and you just hope that you modeled well enough. And so we did learn through that process that they had picked up some of the modeling, but that they also learned, if they learned anything from that, it was to ask for help. And so then they were able to ask for help, explain briefly that they had a disability and they needed a support person. And so they got me over the phone because of COVID, but that they were able to have support at that time. And so it is rough. It is rough. But yeah, at 18, regardless of the disability, they are an adult and they have those rights and pieces.
And I know we have, and I'm gonna fly by this, but it's a testament, because there's been so many parents that I support where I've had the phone call of, breaking down in the car or breaking down in the garage because what just happened? We used to have this service and now we don't, or I can't talk to this person anymore. They won't talk to me. They won't do that. Again, even if you're trained and even if you understand these systems, and even if you know what's going to happen, you have people like Jen and Leanne that have, either been through it or they know all about it. I'm planning on it. It's still going to hurt, and it's still going to be very difficult. But the more I'm educated in what's going on and how those differences are going to happen and how quickly they're going to happen, the better prepared I am, and the better off I am for my kids to be able to transition easily, as opposed to, and again, it's okay to break down in your car. I've done it a million times. But again, it just hits so fast and so hard. And that's why we really push this training, because it is something that most parents don't think about until it's already done. And once it's done, after the child's 18, it's very difficult to get a lot of these things done. It's a lot of time intensive work. Jen will tell you that, Leanne will tell you that, and anyone in the disability world will tell you it's very intense to get any of these services back and to be a part of the child's support system, even if they want you to be. It's still difficult because it's their decision at the end of the day.
Right. And that is a great point, Nick. And again, it goes back to, I know we sound like broken records, but it's our parents' heart that, again, we just want you to have these conversations as a family with your child, if they're capable of being prepared for these changes. Again, like Jen mentioned, some children, they may want you to continue. They may happily sign a power of attorney, and want you to be helping them make those decisions. Or again, if your child's disability mandates it, But again, it's just that being prepared and being ready for it and not being caught off guard after the fact.
For sure. So I saw in the chat that there was a question about 504s, and that's the next section we're going into. So we're going to give you a little teaser and talk about 504s for just a moment, but we do have a workshop Thursday on 504s, and we'll give that information to Leanne so she can share that with you. Because if, you know, this information in this workshop can be very overwhelming, but it's also really good information, like Nick said. So if you haven't had enough of us, you can come on back for some more. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So the 504 plan, if your student is on track to graduate with a diploma, at the last IEP meeting before graduation, you can talk with your case manager, case carrier, depending on what your district calls them, and ask to set a meeting with the 504 coordinator. And the accommodations that are listed in the IEP, we'd love to see the 504 coordinator work with you to put them down in a 504 plan. And then your child, who will soon to be an adult, can take that 504 plan and walk that into their college campus or their post-secondary education place that they're going to go on to, where they can get those accommodations. And so we want to make sure that accommodations that they got in high school, maybe it's more time on a test, testing in a separate quiet area, if they need extended time to do their assignments, that they are entitled and are able to get those accommodations as they move forward in their educational journey. And so we do love to see IEPs turn into 504s at the end of their senior year if they're on track to graduate. That is a very usable tool to move into the next location that they're going to get some education in. Next. So persons with a disability may receive a 504 plan. It's under that law, Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act. It informs the institution receiving federal funding that the student needs accommodations. And if they're getting federal funding, they're entitled to those accommodations. However, the student, the individual with the disability, must let the school know. The school cannot do anything. They're not going to be mind readers and just know that the student comes with extra time on a test. And for some of our students, they don't realize that. So we're going to help guide them as family members to help them get to the disability office so that they can have those accommodations put down at the school and they can get those on their college campus. So 504 accommodations do not change the assignments or the responsibilities. Your child, who's now going to be an adult, is still responsible for all those things. They just give you assistance that you might need, the support that you might need to be able to fulfill that assignment. So like I mentioned, extra time, preferred seating when we're in actual classroom space, note-taking support if needed. Maybe they need some assistive technology, a specialized computer device. Again, maybe they need to test in a smaller setting. So there's lots of accommodations, and really the DSPS office on college campuses, they stay up to date with some really cool things that can assist your student. And so we don't try to dive into that because there's new things that come out all the time and there's new ways they implement accommodations. So really talking to those folks and those counselors, because they know how to navigate their school site to help students with disabilities. Next. So students receiving a certificate of completion upon graduation. And so we get this a lot of times when families hear either their child is on diploma track or their child is on certificate track. And if they're going to get a certificate, we get panicked phone calls from families saying, my child's not going to graduate. And we happily remind families that if you get a certificate of completion, one of the big pieces is they still get to go to graduation. So I think that's one thing that families are so stressed out and worry about. They're going to get a certificate. They don't go to graduation. Your child gets to walk and do all of those pieces with their class. Just the little piece of paper that comes in the folder says certificate of completion instead of diploma. So they still get to walk. But the good news for our students that need to have a certificate of completion, it means that the team has recognized that this student needs support through the age of 22. And the school district is responsible for providing those services and support. And so that child can stay on an IEP. I keep saying child, they're a student, but they're not necessarily a child. That student can stay on an IEP through age 22. They're going to be working on skills. A lot of times they are more functional, independent living based, self-advocacy, employment based, some really great stuff in that 18 to 22-year-old time. So, so program information, depending on what district you are in, will be given your senior year. They'll let you know what the next program looks like. We call those programs ATPs, adult transition programs, because they're preparing you to be an adult. But it is very important, again, and this is a hard one to swallow for a parent, your student's now a legal adult. So even though they're still in the school system, they still might have an IEP, they're 18. They can choose not to go. So it will be their decision as to whether or not they attend their program. And that, again, very hard as a parent to think that our kids can make that choice, that they aren't going to do perhaps what's best for them, which might be to stay in this program, but it is their decision at 18. Next. So adult transition programs, they work on lots of things. It's not just academic. They're working on job training, life skills, being able to speak up, that self-advocacy piece, and how to be part of the community. And from what we've seen in the different districts that we've worked in, we just love some of the things that are offered at the ATP programs. So not all, I mean, that's hard too, because not every program looks different. So there's going to be great things about some programs and not so great things about some programs, but the concept behind it and understanding that our 18 to 22-year-olds need some more time to learn these skills is a pretty cool concept. And I think it attributes to us changing those statistics and to getting our kids, maybe some of our kids just need a couple extra more years so that they can get a job and keep a job. Maybe that's what makes the difference.
My favorite
And
slide.
so additional things to consider that we used to try to tackle in this training, but there's just too much. So we're just giving you a slide with some information. Things to think about as your child is becoming an adult. Think about SSI. Look into CalAble, which Nick, do you want to give the 2-second nugget on CalAble?
Yes, CalAble is an unbelievable program. It's through the Department of the Franchise Tax Board in California. It's for children and adults who have a known disability, and they can put a certain amount of money away in a non-taxable account that is levy proof from the IRS. So even if a bankruptcy occurs or something happens, the IRS cannot touch that money. And you can go to CalAble. Yeah, and it also does not affect your child's Social Security or the adult's Social Security income as well. So again, there's caps. It's a little complicated, but it's an unbelievable program. If you'd like to know more information, go to the CalAble website, or you can contact us because I sit on all of their meetings because it's very interesting.
We also want you to be aware of the Center for Independent Living, which in our area is Resources for Independence, which has a broad definition of disability. So if you have any sort of disability or struggle as an adult, you can go and get some assistance from them. The Regional Center, which a lot of families, as they're part of the educational system, don't necessarily know what Regional Center is, but Regional Center serves individuals with disabilities that are developmental disabilities. And they give lifelong support to those individuals that qualify for services under regional center. And so that's something to look into if your child's not a regional center client, but has a pretty significant disability. You can look into that. IHSS, in-home supportive services, and DOR, and there's always more. But those are a couple of things to consider as your child is becoming an adult.
And Jen, I know the Cal Able, again, thank you, Nick, for that information. It's a great resource. Their YouTube, Cal Able has many webinars on YouTube. And if you Google it, you will find them that are lots of different topics they tackle about those Cal Able accounts. So check it out.
Sounds good. And I know we have a poll before we're done here this evening.
I'm
to
going to launch that right now.
And we will give Leanne the information about our conservatorship workshop, which we host, but we are not the experts that come in. We have paralegals here in town that come in and give information. And so we just make that available to families throughout the state that are interested in the information. And then again, we have a 504 workshop on Thursday, and we'll make sure, Leanne, that you have that information. So if any of the families attending want to come get more information, they can.
Thank you so much. Well, we're about to wrap up. I did post the link to the survey in the chat if any of you are overachievers and can't wait for tomorrow's email with it. But again, please do not try and do this journey alone. That's what EPU, that's what Family Resource Centers are here for. Again, to help you navigate all of this and get you connected to the resources you might need. So, all right, I'm going to end this poll. It looks like everybody is taking it.
And also in the chat, along with that survey, Aubrey has joined us from RICV. Hi, Aubrey. I'm so glad you're here. But she was able to share out that RICV is on Facebook and they have MailChimp sign up. So please sign up. If you're interested in information, please sign up to their listserv as well. They send out amazing resources for adults with disabilities.
All right. Well, I think that is it for this evening. Again, thank you, Jen and Nick. So grateful for all the wisdom you shared tonight. Again, our hearts are to help you parents have a smooth journey and feel supported. Okay, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, and I will share Jen and Nick's emails. Is that okay with you, Jen and Nick, if I share that out tomorrow in the email?
And thank you. And so any family can call us. So you can also give our mainline number. Any family can call us and get a referral to be connected with one of our staff members, and we work in partnership with the school districts. But sometimes, you know, you might be working with Leanne and you might not like what Leanne tells you. And so you come to us, and really what should happen is we should probably give you the same answer that Leanne gives you. If we're all on the same page and following the same laws, we would. And so, but sometimes as parents, we need that third party to say that. And then we go, oh, okay, yeah, we are on the right track. Or you need somebody else's perspective to go, well, what about this? And so that's kind of our role is, Nick said earlier that we're a pro-parent and we're on the parent side, and we are, but we're also on the side of making sure that everybody's understanding each other. And so that's really what our role is to make sure that parents are understanding the school team and that the school team is understanding the parents. And so we like to back up our districts and their family resource centers. And so we're just an added support for you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And good night. We will talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Rebecca.